I don't want to do this, but I need to be honest with you guys. My name is Michael Knipp, and today we are going to be doing my Ship of Magic review. This book is by Robin Hobb, and unfortunately, I have to say that there's not a lot to choose from, but this is easily my most disappointing book of the year so far. Last year, thanks to my patrons, I discovered Robin Hobb, and my journey through the Farseer trilogy experience was one of immense joy of discovery and pain of the actual story, because it was a really emotional, gripping tale. The level of nuance in every character in that book, even though it's a single perspective story, is astounding, and multiple times throughout the year, including my BookTube awards, I praised Robin Hobb for her prose, for her technical ability, and also just for amazing moments, with Royal Assassin being one of my favorite reads of 2020. Oftentimes when people talk about the Farseer trilogy, I see a lot of people say, well, Farseer is pretty good, but Ship of Magic is some of Robin Hobb's best work. In fact, in the entire 17 or so book Realm of the Elderlings series, I've seen the Live Ship Trader series, which Ship of Magic, the book I'm talking about today, is the first book in that trilogy. I've seen that series be a lot of people's favorites throughout the whole thing. And it's possible that things change. In fact, I'm not DNFing the series, but I have to say that Ship of Magic was a huge step down for me on a lot of different levels. I will try to bring up criticisms without comparing it to the Farseer trilogy on every single count, but it is hard for me not to do that, as it is a sequel to that, as well as something that I read in close proximity that I loved by the same author, so I know what she's capable of. And I think ultimately my biggest problem with Ship of Magic was I never ever felt connected to any of the characters, and thus when things happened to them, I didn't particularly feel like the stakes mattered to me, and that made it difficult to be really passionate about anything that was happening. So Ship of Magic takes place in the world of the Realm of the Elderlings. Instead of being based in a typical kingdom like the Farseer trilogy, we follow lots of different characters revolving around, as you might expect from the title, like ship trade. So there's a lot of talk about pirates and trading and the local culture and exploring the world, because yes, this is a fantasy series, and in some ways the magic is more front and center in the Live Ship Trader series than it was back in the Farseer trilogy, because we learn right away in this book that there is a type of wood that you can create things out of, and there's a lot of boats in this story created out of this wood that allow them to be sentient. So the live ships are these sentient boats. The boats are generally tied specifically, like bonded with a family line, because the boats can be around forever, but people die. The boat will become more attached to a family line the longer it's in a family. One of the sets of people that we follow is this family that has had this boat for a significant amount of time, and a lot of the point of views revolve around that family or the crew of that ship. Additionally, the book starts off with some other different point of view characters, one completely non-human, and one a pirate attempting to become a pirate lord or king. Now, the prose in Live Ship Traders, I think, takes a little bit of a step down from the prose that we saw in the Farseer trilogy. This could be an intentional choice, because the Farseer trilogy was supposed to sort of be an epistolary written by a character that was taught to be a scribe. And this story, I don't think there's any in-world justification for the writing of the story that we've seen yet. We're just being told the story generally. So it doesn't have that like regal feeling, fancy style of the Farseer trilogy that I thought was so beautiful. And because we're not dealing with a bunch of people in a royal line or like in a royal castle, a lot of the dialogue is also not as pretty, because we're dealing with traders and pirates and seafarers most of the time. So while it fits, it just isn't as gripping for me personally. As I alluded to earlier, my biggest problem with this is I didn't really care about any of the characters, and thus didn't really care about their plights, aka the plot. And I'm really struggling with wondering how in the world a lot of people talk about this being their favorite Robin Hobb book, not liking the Farseer trilogy, because most commonly the criticism that I see leveled against Farseer is that Fitz is too whiny and he makes too many dumb decisions. I feel like, as someone that likes books like Twilight and some other different young adult fare, I have a pretty high tolerance for whininess or incompetence, but this book surpassed my limit. Sometimes I see reviewers from Casey like Lost in a Bookcase get really frustrated with a character in a book and wish something really evil on them. And one of the POV characters in this book, and I think that we're supposed to not like this person, but it wasn't so much that I just disliked the person as I hated being in their point of view so much that I probably might have DNF'd this. A lot of people, in fact, say to start with a Live Ship Trader series and skip the Farseer trilogy because it's not that good. I would never have finished this book if I had not finished the Farseer trilogy. I don't think. I would have DNF'd it because on top of the one whiny character that we deal with, there's no positive POVs, and there's a lot of point of view characters in this book. I think there's at least 7, if not maybe 8 different point of views in this book, and none of them, I don't want to say none of them, one of them was interesting, maybe 2, if I'm reaching to the best parts, 3, because there were some characters that I hated in the beginning, and by the end I thought, you're fine now. Which is to say, maybe that continues. Maybe going into the next book, they'll continue to grow. I am curious, but man, this was rough. And I feel like I'm a semi-versatile reader. If there's an interesting plot, sometimes I can overlook some of the character stuff I don't care for as much, or if the characters are really engaging, I could ignore the fact that there's no plot. This is the type of book where for the majority of the book, there really isn't any plot. The plot of the book is following the characters on their journey, but that requires you, as I've said before, to care about the characters on that journey. And when I end up wishing evil on most of the characters instead of wanting them to succeed, I don't think that book accomplished its goals. There are some characters in the book that I can't decide if I'm supposed to like them or not. Sometimes it feels like you're supposed to love them. Sometimes it feels like you're supposed to hate them. And because of how bad some of the hate them parts were, I never liked them, but it wasn't the type of hate that I enjoy. The primary antagonist of the Farseer trilogy is a character that I despised so much. There were reasons that varied at different points in the series on why that character was still around. There is a character that is so awful in this book, but there are so many instances for people to remove this character from the scene and no one does anything. It's frankly absurd. And frankly, I feel like we're supposed to be witnessing the family in this series at a transition point when most of the characters are making a change with something that was normal in their life. But in my brain, there is no believable way that the characters ever reached this point if they're as competent during their change as we're supposed to think that they are. And so it's really hard to get invested in their change of heart. One of the most interesting elements of the Farseer trilogy is the way that even characters that were in direct conflict with each other, they were fighting and they had very different goals, you could very much understand that person's personality and why they may be viewing the world in the way that they do. You can understand ways in which all of these people, through completely rational or at least character consistent logic, would end up in the positions that they do, but they end up on conflicting sides of an argument, and it's so tough to watch them struggle. But that depth, it was a massive draw for me. None of it is in the Live Ship Trader series. I don't really care about any of their motivations to begin with. I don't think they're being logical. Sometimes they're being character consistent. But because so many of them are so flawed and not in an enjoyable way to me, when they did clash, it never felt like I was torn. I was never caring about both sides of the issue. It was like, you're an idiot, you're also an idiot. I kind of hope something bad just happens to both of you. And maybe if we got to see something bad happen to you, I wouldn't have to go back to that awful POV character. I realize that I've been talking mostly negative about this. There are cool aspects. I like the idea of these living ships. I like some of the things that they're trying to say around that. I really like the mystery surrounding some of the culture of the traders themselves. And there are parts of things relating to that culture and the magic secrecy around that culture that is way more fascinating than anything we actually got to see in this book. So if we're going to be focusing on that more moving forward, which it seems like that may be the direction, I'm still interested. And I really hope that moving forward, because like I said, I do plan on continuing in this series, I hope that moving forward we can start focusing on the interesting elements, or maybe now that we've fleshed out a lot of how these characters are extremely dumb and flawed, we can start to see them grow in meaningful ways. But I am in no real hurry to continue with this series. It's not going to be one of the priorities I have moving forward, which is not something that I said after reading the ending of any of the 3 previous Robin Hobb books. Now I realize that this is just my perspective. I did share it with some of the people that I was buddy reading this book with, but I've heard from so many different people about how this is such a great series, and this might be a better point on jumping on for Robin Hobb's work. If you are someone who enjoyed the Live Ship Traders series, could you explain to me down below, hopefully without spoilers for the rest of the series, what about it worked so well for you? Because even if I didn't love this series, I would love to hear what resonated so strongly with other people. That always fascinates me, and frankly, I'm happy that you were able to enjoy it more than I did. And if you haven't read this series yourself, but you know someone that did and that loved it, please ask them to come here and share their thoughts on why they thought Live Ship Traders was so awesome. I really would love to hear from more people with that perspective. The saddest thing about all of this was that I had really high hopes going into this one. I cannot express, and I still don't think I have expressed, just how much I loved the Farseer trilogy and Robin Hobb's work with crafting that wonderful world, that scenario, and those characters. I know that she is capable of doing way more awesome work, at least work that appeals to me so much more. And that's why I still gave this book a middling rating, because it wasn't awful, it just wasn't great. And it was most disappointing because I feel like it could have been so much better. If you have any thoughts on anything that I've said here today, please leave a comment down in the comment section down below. If you like this review, please leave a thumbs up, or if you completely disagree with me, you can leave that thumbs down as well. If you'd like to see more reviews from me, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you'd like to discuss this in another forum, I have a link down below to a Discord server that's free for everybody to join. And if you'd like to support me financially, there's a link down below to a Patreon as well. Oh, there's also a link to the merch store where you can buy dumb shirts like this one. It says frick. Anyway, here's to hoping that the rest of my reads in 2021 are better than this. And if this is the worst thing I read in 2021, it's not that bad, it just isn't good. I hope to see you all again soon. I love you all. Goodbye.
Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If it don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.